All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Normally, this is where you would see me, probably if you've seen me around town or on vacation in various places around Michigan or around the country. It's, there I am in California. It's weird. I run into people from Michigan all the time out there, but that's normally where you see me. But I'm really excited to have you into my studio today. I have not been in this space for even a year yet. I live in a tiny 2-bedroom bungalow, and for the longest time, for several years, my studio was on the main floor in the bedroom there, and our bedroom was in our upstairs space. My husband was going through cancer treatment last year, and the stairs were really wearing him out. And some of our very good friends said to us, "Hey, why don't we just flip your studio and your bedroom? We'll help you. We'll make it livable. Don't worry about it." And they did. They flipped. They completely brought every single thing, and it's a lot of my studio up here. They made my husband comfortable in the bedroom downstairs and moved me right in here. We did all of this last November, and that was a little bit of a stressful time to do that because it's right when people are trying to buy Christmas presents. There's all sorts of Christmas markets, holiday markets. So I was moving studios in the middle of that. And that combined with the treatment that my husband was going through, I never ended up being able to show anyone my studio. I never ended up being able to have anyone come up and see my space. I didn't meet any clients here. So this is really the first time that I've opened my studio up to anyone, and I'm so excited. So this is my space. I'm upstairs. I've got 2 big windows there. I've got the blinds drawn so that the lighting is a little bit better for the video, but I have my bench right here. It's my favorite piece in the studio. My dad made this for me, so it's custom fit to me, to the chair that I use. I have my buffing wheel behind me. This table is kind of a catch-all table. I do sketching, I do some assembly here, packing up orders to send out to shops and galleries. And then over here, I have my soldering table. I have a window right here, and I always have a fan going just to circulate the air, but then I have this air filter here. And then just over this way, and I'll turn the camera for a minute. You can see this area right here is where I do all of my photography. In their home, right? So this is upstairs in my studio. That's a nice place for me to sit and sketch. And then this right here at this computer, at this desk, is where I do all of my inventory and website maintenance. So I'm really excited to have you here. Jewelry making is a lot of fun. I'm so excited to share it with you, but it's very tiny. So it's very tiny, and it's surprisingly loud for the size of the work that you're creating. And so because of that, because it would be very difficult to see, and because I move around the studio so much, I'm up and down, I'll walk, my watch will tell me I've walked like 2 miles just being in my studio for 8 hours. So I'm up and down a lot. So I have a video prepared for you. I welcome any questions or comments, but I'm going to go ahead and play the video, and I'm going to tell you what I'm doing as I'm doing it. It seemed like that was the easiest way to really invite you in and show you my process working from start to finish on a piece of jewelry.
Hey, Meg.
So, yes?
Sorry. And I just wanted to let people know who might have come in late. If you have a question while Meg's playing her video, if you can type it in the chat, and I can relay it to Meg so that we can pause the video there.
All right. Should I go ahead?
Go for it.
Okay. All right, so this is me working in my studio. Right now I'm getting my materials out. That's where I keep all of my materials. I'm making a piece based on something I've been thinking about all summer. We normally go on a camping trip with friends up north. And it's an annual camping trip and it's so much fun and I love it. And we didn't get to go this year. And I've been thinking about it all August, and I wanted to make a piece of jewelry to represent this time. And so I'm choosing a Petoskey stone. I try and use stones sourced locally. Um, Michigan, the United States, I like to be able to trace the stones. Um, so I'm making a piece based on up north using a Petoskey stone. I think about things like camping and the color of the water when you go to the lake and the sun starts to set and you get all the beautiful grays, and how when you're skipping the stones just kind of ripple out and the ripples, you know, overlap as you're in the water. And this is where my mind is going. The jewelry I create a lot of natural pieces based on nature, and a lot of lunar elements to them. So things like the tides, the water, that gets incorporated in. And so as I'm sketching, I make myself a list of ideas and materials that I want to make sure that I have and places that I'm going. I can really just basically see this piece in my mind though already. And so it's really just a matter of me trying to bring that to life as best I can. Right now, I'm taking this cabochon stone. It means it's rounded on the top, flat on the bottom. And I'm making what's called a bezel. And it's a very thin strip of fine silver that goes all the way around the stone. I measure very, very carefully because I want that to fit very, very snugly around the stone to really hold it in place. That's what's going to keep that stone in the piece of jewelry. So I'm measuring, just making sure, double checking. And right there, I'm cutting all my scrap into that green dish. I save everything and I send it to be recycled and refined within the United States. And then in return, I get refined silver sent back to me. Everything I use is nickel-free sterling silver. I use gold. All my materials are recycled and refined to the greenest standards. All my studio practices are the greenest standards that I can adhere to. Right now, I'm using a piece of sterling silver to make the backing of this stone, and I'm using a jeweler's saw. The blade is like a millimeter and a half wide. It's really, really tiny, so I can make really thin, delicate cuts. And I'm cutting that piece out. That is going to get soldered. So that's a hot method of joining two pieces of metal together. And they're gonna get put together, and that's what's gonna hold the stone in place. That's my cart of hand tools. It's probably the most used cart. There I am putting all of my silver scraps, even little bits of dust, into that dish. I save everything. Soldering is probably my favorite part of jewelry making. I really love using the torch. Right now what I'm doing is getting small pieces of sheet solder ready to seal up that bezel, and then I will take the bezel, fit it to the stone, and put it on that base of flat sterling silver. I'm using a spray there called Fire Scoff. It's a non-toxic substance that helps prevent fire scale and dirt from building up on the silver as I'm soldering it. So I'm gonna place these are really, really tiny, you can barely see them there. They're just little chips that I cut out of solder, which is a metal. It's a mixture of metal, a bunch of different alloys that are going to melt at about 1500 degrees. And that is what's going to kind of create it's almost like spreading Elmer's glue, right? So you melt it and it kind of spreads around like glue and it will hold everything closed. So I'm using an acetylene torch, quenching the bezel, and now I'm going to super fit it to the cabochon stone. It's a very different process than setting faceted stones. The first thing I need to do is some actual cleanup on the inside of the bezel. Any of the solder that's maybe bumped up and is not smooth, I am taking out. I want that solder to sit very, very flush to the wall of my stone. So I'm fitting it in, it looks good. I love that stone. It has the most beautiful eyes and the little Petoskey corals. And now I'm making sure that it lays flat on the sheet metal. I'm going to go ahead and use more of those tiny chips of solder that I've cut to adhere the bezel to that base of sheet silver. And I just cut them up. I'm working on a fire brick. They're specifically made for, you know, for torches and hot use. And right now I have that piece of silver set up on what's called a nest. It's coiled up binding wire, and it lifts the piece up off of the fire brick so that heat can circulate all the way around, because you need to bring the metal up to a consistent temperature all over to make sterling silver flow and solder. So the whole piece has to come to temperature at once for the solder to flow, and that is specific to sterling silver. I'm changing the tip on my torch. I'm using a larger tip because I'm soldering a larger surface area. I wish you could hear that. It kind of makes this cool popping noise. And right now I'm drying that flux spray, that non-toxic flux spray, to help keep it cool. And I'm rotating the piece to help create this even heating effect. And I'm aiming the torch down at the fire brick, which is bouncing the heat up underneath. So I've just finished soldering, I've quenched it, I'm checking it to make sure, and I'm putting it in a solution called pickle, no relation to the food. It's an acid solution. I'm setting my timer so that I can grab it out of the pickle when it's done, but it helps take that layer of dirt from the soldering off. And now I'm gonna go ahead and find the wire that I think will look the best to bring my vision of these ripples moving out from the inside of the stone. And those are my hand tools. They're very much like pliers that you would use in home improvement projects, except for they're specifically jeweler's pliers because they have very smooth jaws to them so that you don't mar the metal. So anywhere that plier is going to touch the metal is smoother without teeth. Right now I'm bending the wire. I have this idea in my mind of what I want it to look like. And I love to use sterling silver wire. I love to use all kinds of wire. I use it almost as though I'm drawing. And I feel like it just, you know, some things just work for you and it feels really good. You know, it just kind of comes out, the ability to draw with this wire. And I really enjoy that. So I'm shaping. This part takes a long time for me sometimes, just to move everything just right and to have everything overlap. So I just I call it fussing. I keep fussing with all of it until it lays and it has the right feeling for me. That's kind of my ways of communicating in a lot of aspects. So I'm putting everything together around the bezel. And now I'm getting my ear protection. I'm kind of a safety girl. I'd like to make sure that I have a respirator and a mask, and these are noise canceling headphones that I use. I love them. I'm using a tiny frets hammer, one of my very favorite tools in the studio, on a striking plate. It's a steel striking plate. I'm very careful to only hit the wire. I only want to hit the metal so I don't mar the surface of the hammer. And now I'm grabbing a sanding stick, 400 grit. I use 220, 400, and 600 grit automotive sandpaper because that is specifically made for metal. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to soften the edges of all the wires that I've just hammered. And I'm also going in and cleaning up any of those places where I've sawed out and maybe there's some burrs or something on there. I'm just really creating a soft edge to the metal. I'm flattening the top right now of the bezel to make sure that when I push it around that stone, it's nice and even and has the right look that I'm trying to achieve. Oh, and that white box that I'm using is a dust collector. So carefully, I'm taking it over to the bench because I really want to be able to see that in my mind and also on the brick when I go to solder it all together. So the soldering process can take several steps. I will solder different parts at different times. Right now I'm using a Sharpie marker to go ahead and make sure that I have things lined up the way I want them, and that Sharpie burns off, I think it burns off around 1,000 degrees, but it burns off cleanly. It doesn't leave any dirt on the metal. I'm working extremely clean. Any grease or debris or dirt on the metal, it doesn't just burn off, it kind of burns off and leaves a residue, and that prevents solder from flowing. So I'm being really, really cautious. Wear my respirator all the time, especially when I'm soldering. And it's not bad, it's pretty comfortable. It's a little hot sometimes, but not bad. I'll wear it like eight hours a day. Sometimes if I'm working overtime, 8-10 hours, and it's not bad. So I'm soldering right now. I'm putting those wires together. And this time I was using a paste solder because it's a little bit more forgiving and it mushes in a little bit, and I can kind of push it where I want it to go as I'm placing the wires in. So it's already been quenched in the water to cool it down and gone into the pickle. Oh, and the pickle, I don't heat it. I use the pickle cold so that there are no fumes, toxic fumes that come off of it, which is really important. I'm making some more markings for myself so that I know, so I don't forget to place any solder anywhere. Again, I'm using that paste solder. I just use a really teeny tiny toothpick to place it where I want it to go. I don't use anything metal to place it because it'll stick to the metal and can get kind of gunky. And now I'm adding some granules. And what granules are little bits of sterling silver or fine silver that have been heated and dropped into water. It's really, really fun. It's the first step in making casting grain, which is a whole other thing. So these granules are used for a lot of different things. I like to use them as accents in my work. I love the irregular shapes. I love the different sizes, and I love that super shiny look that they give off. And in this piece, I think it's going to enhance the idea of the lake stones by the shore and in the water when you're walking on the, into the lake. So right now I'm going to go ahead and solder, and I'm using the smaller tip of the torch, and again, moving it all around. I'm not putting it up on a nest because I don't need to heat underneath as much. I'm not specifically trying to get the heat underneath, so I'm just using the sides. I'm touching it to the steel table so that it prevents it from warping, and then I cooled it off, pickled it again in that acid solution, and now I'm just giving myself a rough sketch with a pencil on the inside. Some of you are familiar with my work, and you know that I like to, when I have the opportunity, I like to add a little bit of an embellishment behind a stone, just kind of a small secret for the person who the stone is, or for the person who the pendant is meant for. And this is in keeping with this camping weekend up north. It's a little pine tree, it's a little bit of the ground, a little bit of the lake. And here I'm adding a moon. So there's that lunar element that I try and bring to everything. And there'll be a couple stars in there. I think it's a cute scene, and it's kind of the perfect little secret accent for a Petoskey stone. I think that's what everyone thinks of when they think of up north, the lake and the beautiful scenery up there. Right now, I'm using what's called a chasing hammer, and I'm just using a concrete nail to make a little dap in the metal. And that is so I can use a drill bit and drill in without the drill kind of skittering across the surface of the metal. It's a super tiny drill bit. That is a flex shaft. And it's like a Dremel tool with a sewing machine pedal attached to it. So I'm holding the saw or the drill bit straight up and down, and I push just gently. I use Burlife, that's a little blue container. There's the foot pedal. And I feel like it's like you're going like 25 through a school zone. You drive slow when you're drilling or using a flex shaft. You don't want to go too fast. And there's that jeweler's saw blade again. I love sawing. It's one of the most zen feelings for me. You just get into a rhythm. And so I use a little bit of beeswax. I just put it on the back of my my saw blade to just keep it a little bit lubricated, and taking care not to saw into my fingers. I'm sawing out all of that negative space that I've created. That's me. I just blow or brush the sawdust off so I can see where I'm going. It's such a hypnotic rhythm. I really love it. Sawing out the moon. Oh, that V-shaped piece of wood is called a bench pin. My dad made that for me as well. And it's kind of a go-to for jewelers. Everyone uses them, whether they're sawing or bracing metal or whatever you're doing, sanding, filing, drilling. So it's really a great tool to have. And I'm saving my scrap, all the little bits and pieces of silver that fall off. And now that it's getting close, I'm fitting the stone once more. I take a photo, just an in-progress photo, really just for myself. Those are my hand tools again, more hand tools. And I made jump rings, which are the little round circles that you'll see, and that will attach the pendant to the chain. It's called the bail. And so I'm going back and I'm soldering one of those jump rings on, and that's gonna be affixed. Going back into that pickle solution to help clean it up. I'm using just a different mask. I don't need a full-on respirator because I'm not using fumes right now. And I'm using a brass brush as my first step to cleaning this up. And that really just helps take all the extra gunk off. And then I go back in, and the sanding stick helps to shape and get any of those pieces of solder or little burrs or anything that might be on the surface of the metal that I want to get off. And that's also sandpaper right there. It's on the Dremel. So I'm using that to help smooth everything as well. There's a lot of changing tips on the Fordham. Going back to the brass brush to do the edges. Oh, and I've got some 3M wheels on there. And those have just a little bit of fine grit on them. It's part of the polishing and finishing process. And I did that all over. Tidying up a little bit. I work pretty clean. I also work very tidy. I like to know where everything is. I feel like it makes you able to work faster. All right, so checking it out one more time, just kind of getting the idea of the placement of the stone, the direction that the stone is gonna face. And now I'm making liver of sulfur. It's stinky like raw eggs. You can tell when I'm using it in the house, it's kind of gross, but it's not bad. And what it's going to do is create a chemical reaction that creates a patina on the metal. So the patina is anytime you add a color to the metal. So I'm hanging it off a piece of copper wire, just swishing it. It's just some liver of sulfur mixed with hot water, and then a clean hot water rinse. And I'll go back and forth and I'll do this until the metal darkens to the color that I like. In this case, I'm going for a really, really deep black. A lot of times you get these kind of iridescent purples and blues within the patina, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So I've gotten it very, very nice and dark. Everything feels sanded. I'm drying it very well with a Q-tip. Putting the stone in. And this time I'm pushing it all the way in. Giving it just a careful little tap. I wrapped it in leather so nothing gets marred. I really want it to fit in completely flush to the base of that metal. And I'm using painter's tape now, and I'm taping the surface of the stone. I'm doing that so that I don't scratch the surface of the stone. Petoskey's kind of a soft stone, so it will really scratch really easily. And I'd be able to buff it out, but I don't want to mess up the surface of the stone at all. I've added what's called alligator's tape. It just helps you grip and hold on to pieces, helps prevent you from cutting yourself. And I'm using a bezel pusher that I made. I am pushing the top of that bezel all the way up around the edge of the stone. And there's just about 1 millimeter of silver holding that in. And that's really all you need to hold in any stone. Cabochon, faceted stone, whatever. You just need 1 millimeter of metal, of any kind of metal to hold that in, which is really interesting, at least to me. And I'm applying actually quite a bit of force to this, because the more you work the metal, the harder it becomes, which is ultimately what you want. You want it to be nice and hard and hold that stone in. And now I'm using a super fine, I believe that's what it's called, super fine steel wool. I use that with liver of sulfur to soften that dark patina down. It takes the patina off of the high spots. And I'm just scrubbing it gently across the back to kind of give it that beautiful gray color I was envisioning. I've got my headphones on again so that I can sign it. I just use a little engraver. I like to sign with my name if possible, because if this is a piece of art that I've created, I want to sign it. And then I put a hallmark on it that says 925. And that denotes that it's sterling silver. And metal is considered a currency. Sterling silver, gold, anything like that is considered a currency. And so federal law dictates that you have to, if you're going to have something for sale, you have to hallmark it and let people know this is officially what the metal is made of, which I also think is kind of interesting. And I'm using that jump ring that I made to attach it to a sterling silver chain that I think kind of brings that whole idea of the granules and the stones up into the chain around the neck. And now I'm going over and I'm turning on my light box, and I'm going to photograph this piece. I'm going to photograph it. I'm going to edit the photos. And I do this all on an iPhone 7 Plus. It's got a great camera. It works out really well for me. I didn't think that I was going to love it this much, but I love taking all the photos. I love doing the upkeep of the inventory. And that's something that this COVID situation has really let me explore something in a positive light. And I really appreciate that I've and figure out how much I like working online like this and in my studio. So I measure it so I measure the pendant so people know how big it is when they're looking at it online. And that's just looking at it next to next to the piece. Oh, and I'm trying it on. I try everything on. I don't want anything to be sharp. I want to make sure that everything is comfortable, that it fits well, that is sturdy. And there it is. I think that I brought that idea of that weekend up north to life. So that is that's the video that I have. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So,
Okay.
oh, can you see those questions now?
I can see one. It's so approximately how long is the process in real time from beginning to end? This process was approximately 3 hours to make this particular pendant. Some things go a little bit faster, some things go a little bit slower, the more involved they are. It'll definitely add more time if there are more stops to solder, more things to clean up in the middle. But this pendant took roughly 3.5 hours. I would say 3 hours if someone was not filming me. So, oh, thank you.
Speaking of which, someone says nice camera work too. So kudos to your cameraman.
Thank you. My cameraman, I am completely spoiled. My cameraman is actually a professional cameraman and happens to be my husband, and that happens to be his job. So he put this video together for me, and I'm very grateful for him spending all that time. So I will pass on that compliment to him. Yeah. Oh, thank you for all those nice compliments and comments on the video and my work. Thank you. I also have just a very short slideshow to show you some of my favorite pieces of jewelry because I do several different things. So if that's, can I go ahead and, should I go ahead and start that?
Ahead.
Okay. All right, so these are Kyanite earrings, and I picked these because I love working with raw stones. I love working with unusual stones. This is a pair of earrings that I love. These are more ellipses. They're orbit earrings, so more of that lunar theme. I also, in addition to big sparkly jewelry, I like just small dainty jewelry that you can almost barely see. So these are some hearts and waves. I like very modern looking jewelry, so I make some of those pieces. And then again, these are more raw crystal fluorites that I just really enjoy. I also work with enamel, and that's something that and enamel is powdered glass that you heat in a kiln, and you see right here, this is my enameling kiln. It's a blue kiln. It normally sits up here when I'm working on it. It's super, super hot. Like, oh gosh, is it 1200? I heat it up to about 1500 degrees and melt melt glass onto metal that way. So that's a lot of fun. And we're back to that. So, and then I have just a couple other pieces that I'll show you. This is a custom wedding band that I did. This is actually the back of the finished piece that I was just making in the video. And there's the front. I love making these moons with the crows on them. I'm wearing something very similar. Each one ends up being a little bit different. And those crows are all sawed out. This is one of my favorite pieces, one of my classic pieces, the Ohm Pendant. I like to do a lot of nesting things and more of that patina in there.
Yeah, I think one of our attendees is actually wearing that that pendant you were just showing off.
Are you serious? Oh, I love it. Thank you. This is a custom piece that was a lot of fun, an anniversary gift, and it's petrified coral set in sterling silver, and it's got some of that patina. You saw that process. This is called a fade-in or a mending crystal, and it's got some of those ripples that you just saw. My dad and I had worked on a project where we translated his calligraphy onto the metal. So he did all of the calligraphy, and I etched all of that in a copper bimetal. So it's a piece of sterling silver with a piece of copper fused to the top. And I use a process where I would adhere his calligraphy to it and then put it in a different kind of acid solution and take it down to the silver. And so you see that beautiful rosy copper color on top of the silver. And that was a custom piece. It says Grace of God. And a custom wedding band. I don't use new stones. I always repurpose whatever stone someone might have. So in this case, a woman brought her stone to me, and we reconfigured and reset the wedding band. And this also has kind of an up north outdoorsy vibe to it as well. This was another wedding band that I did that was carved and layered and just a lot of fun to make. And a sapphire wedding ring. That brings us back to the beginning.
So Meg, you did have some questions while you were showing the slides, if you can see them.
Oh yeah, okay. How do you decide when a wire needs to be super strong? I decide when a wire is strong enough. Well, let me start over. Okay, so as you're working with metal, it's all these molecules put together. And when you go through the refining process and the forming process into new stock, right? The metal, the molecules, every time you heat the molecules, they get all relaxed and they start to spread out. And that's great because it means the wire has gotten really malleable. But it also means that when it's that malleable, it can keep moving. And in the metal itself, if it can keep moving, we'll find a weak point. Like if you've ever taken a piece of metal or even a twisty tie, like from bread that's metal, and you bend it back and forth, eventually it will break. And it's doing that because the metal wasn't hard enough, if that makes sense. So as I'm working, every time I solder something, the metal really relaxes. And then every time I move the metal in some way, whether it's with a hammer or with my tools, or even tapping it lightly with a mallet just to do what's called work hardening. I'm not shaping or forming it. I'm just compressing those molecules together a little bit more so they're not all spread out and comfortable. That makes the metal strong enough that it's not going to move around as you're wearing it. And the metal then won't be searching for a weak point and start moving back and forth and breaking apart that way. So when I make all of my own ear wires, and what that means is that I start with a piece of metal. I don't know if you can see this there. I start with a piece of metal and it's just long and it's very soft and easy to bend. And I take the metal and I will form it using pliers and my hands and some other tools. And then I take a mallet. I put it on that steel block you saw before, and I take what's called a rawhide mallet. It's not going to leave any marks at all on my metal. And I hammer it lightly all over, and I flip it over and I hammer it again so that when you see it, see it's got that nice spring. If I hadn't done that, it would just mush together completely, and that's when it would fall apart. So that's how I kind of decide how strong the metal is going to be. And I'm really working towards it being very strong at the end. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see, could you speak more on how you find your inspiration? When working with stones, do you start with them as an inspiration or add them in later on? Both. I do both. My inspiration comes from a lot of traveling and being out in nature and seeing different things, and just kind of small obsession that I have with the moon and the phases of the moon, and just the idea that there's so much out there. And every time I go somewhere, I'm just looking at all the details in the environment, and whether it's buildings or trees or visiting parks, national parks, anything I can do, just even walking around my neighborhood, I'm always looking at nature. I'm looking at these small details. And in terms of stones, it happens both ways. Sometimes I'll see a stone and I'll know immediately what I want to do with it. And I've got to have that stone and I've got to make something, and that's it. Other stones sit with me. I have stones that are sitting with me for years, for 15, 20 years. I have a few stones that they're beautiful. And when it's their time, they'll be set. Sometimes I'll make a piece and think, oh, you know what? It needs something that I didn't see before that it needed. And then I'll, maybe find something or have an idea of a couple stones that might work. So it's a little bit of both. I hope that answered your question. How did I learn this, and how long have I been creating this artwork? I have been making jewelry now for over 20 years. I started in high school. I thought I always wanted to be an artist. That was a given. When I was very, very little, I was 4 or 5. Our neighbor was a macrame artist and would travel and do art fairs. And my parents took me to one of them, and I just thought it was the coolest thing, like traveling around, meeting people, sharing your artwork with people. And so from that moment, I was like, well, I'm going to be an artist. Thought I was going to be maybe a painter. Turns out I'm not great at that, which was okay. And then I found jewelry, and it clicked. From the very first class that I took in high school, it clicked. Things made sense, all of the steps. It's a lot of problem solving. Before I start a piece, what you didn't see in this is that I've got to sit for I'll think about a piece for days before I go to put it together. And then before I do it, I'll think about what are the different steps. I don't want to miss anything. So I'm constantly, thinking about what my next step is, but also 5 steps down the line. And I have studied, I started young, and then started taking classes I took jewelry classes at the KIA, the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts, when I was in high school. And then I went to college and I took classes in East Lansing. I went to Michigan State and I took classes in East Lansing. I studied at the Revere Academy of Jewelry Arts in San Francisco. So I took professional goldsmithing classes. I also apprenticed at a K jeweler for a while. I learned so much there, working in a repair shop, and I use those skills to this day. Everything that you just saw were things that I learned and perfected in all of those classes and at the repair shop. But what all of that taught me too was that I like to make things that are one of a kind. I feel like when I make a piece, there is someone out there that piece is meant for. And so I like my pieces to be one of a kind. Everything that, even if I make this, 3 of the same pair of earrings, I will do something to make each one a little bit different. And that's just something that I like to do. So I hope that answers your question. But I've been doing this. I've been selling jewelry at art fairs for, I don't know, maybe 15 years. I love it. I miss it. Okay, so I answered the last one. What inspired you to do this line of work? My neighbor, Carol. So, and just as a as an aside, I think one of the greatest moments of my career was I was at an art fair, I think I was in Bronson Park at the art fair, and she's retired now, but my neighbor, this wonderful artist, came into my booth and got to see what I was doing and find out that she was the inspiration for all of that. So that was really cool. That was a great moment in my career. Something that makes my heart happy. So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions that they want to ask Meg? Now's your chance. All right. Well, I really cannot thank you enough for being part of this, Meg. This is awesome. And I think based on what I'm seeing from the faces of the people on here, I think everyone really enjoyed this too.
Oh,
I see some clapping.
thank you
Yay.
so much, everyone. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh. Okay, I can see people now. Oh, hello. Oh, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so happy to be able to share my space with you and show you a little bit of what I do. And I hope that you found it informative and interesting and gives a little bit of insight to my work.
So will you be sending it?
Oh, wouldn't that just be the best? That would be so fun to send jewelry to everyone.
And Meg, what's your website so people can go check it out?
Oh, my website is www.megtang.com. I can type it into the chat.
Oh, it already is in there.
Oh, well, thanks, Stuart. Yep, and my Instagram is at Meg Tang Jewelry, and Meg Tang Jewelry on Facebook. I'm always posting new work, and thanks for all that promotion there. I see people putting my website out there and my Instagram. Thank you. What's that? I posted that piece. Oh yeah, if you're interested in that, I'm sorry. There's my cameraman over there. He said, don't forget to tell everyone that you're posting that piece. So yeah, I actually have the piece right here. It'll be online momentarily. I've got some new work out. So if you're interested in that, and just to everyone who's come out, thank you so much for your support, and keep shopping local. It's not just me, it's all of us. So we really appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. People have been sharing my work and just really supporting the arts and supporting local artists. So I just want to say thank you. I'm so grateful that I have this community.
Well, and to that end, once again, if anybody has any suggestions for other artists that you'd like to see the inside of their studio, I've already got a couple on here, so thank you for that. You can email them to me at the address that you got the link for today's Zoom from, or use the contact form on the KPL website. So. All right. Well, thank you again, Meg, for being a part of this, and thank you all of you for showing up and checking out Meg's presentation.
Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great day and a great weekend.
Thanks, Meg.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.